Okay, and the last of the new policy objectives is the government's finances. So each year, the government has to decide how much it's going to tax and how much it's going to spend. Yeah, and it does that. In something called the budget. Coronavirus has messed this up. Yeah, but generally these days it tends to be the autumn. And in the budget, in the budget, the government decides on firstly how much it would like to spend, and secondly, it has to decide what it's going to do with taxes. These two things don't have to be equal. Yeah. And for a lot of governments, it tends to be the case that usually government spending is greater than the overall level of taxation. Yeah. So they're spending more than they raise in the form of income. Yeah. So they have what's called a budget deficit, or some people will call that a fiscal deficit. Yeah. Because this is part of what's called fiscal policy. That means that the government will have to borrow, and that leads to an increase in what's called the national debt. And the national debt is simply all of the borrowing that has ever been done, all added together. So if in year one, the government borrows $10 billion, and in year two they borrow £15 billion, then each of those is the budget deficit for year one and year two. Overall, we'll have a national debt of $25 billion. Because we borrowed 10 in year one, and you can't see that, we borrowed 10 in year one, 15 in year two, so overall we borrowed 25. That's national debt. So that's generally, it's often necessary for the government to do this, but we can see that there are going to be clear risks, with the deficit being too big. So if we end up with high levels of deficit and debt, that creates a number of things. So firstly, it has to be, we have to repay that debt. And we have to repay it with interest. So nobody's going to lend you money for nothing. So therefore, that creates an opportunity cost. By borrowing now, we have to pay back more later. And the opportunity cost of those interest payments is we could have used that money to do other things, putting into health and education and so on. Secondly, there is, if you borrow too much, there is a risk of damage to your credibility. And what then happens is that borrowing becomes more expensive, which then makes the first problem even worse. So the US has a national debt of, I can't remember now, it's like $25 trillion or something. And that's ultimately that's potentially problematic. They've had to borrow to finance that, and they have to make interest payments to service that debt. So therefore, whilst often borrowing money to create growth or to reduce inequality or to build infrastructure and so on can be a good thing, there are risks associated with that. This is all part of fiscal policy, which we'll come to in much, much more detail in a subsequent walkthrough, but that's just kind of a heads up for something that we're going to come on to cover.